Hey, Ian, thank you so much for making yourself available. It is
Of
Friday,
course.
the 2nd of January at 3 minutes past 8 as I press record, UK time. And we're going to be doing a short video talking about gold and silver and why they're going up and what's likely to happen with regards to gold and silver and I suppose other currencies. And people can find you. I'll have the links, Ian Burlingame, your Substack, fabulous articles, and also your X. Yes, and you're
Wonderful.
an army veteran and an author and a and
I
a
did a bunch of other boring things like finance and technology and
yes.
yeah.
Yes, and a historian in English history as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
because so far every month we've done a video with Graham
Yeah.
Moore from the English Constitution Party. Okay, so we start by talking about gold and silver, and I'm curious to know why you think they're both going up in value, or put the other way, why fiat is losing value.
Well, for this, nothing's as simple as a straightforward binary, as you know,
Mhm.
particularly given your day-to-day profession, right? Nothing's so simple as walking in and that one did it and that one didn't, and they're to blame and they're not, and this is what it
Yep.
was, right? It's never that. Okay. So um, with respect to the debasing of the currency, we have to do that. We have to further break the euro dollar system and drain dollars out of the system so that we can break independent and free in the US and regain our own actual sovereignty. And in order to have sovereignty as a state, as per the Westphalian and Inglorious models, right, the Inglorious Revolution models of the 1600s, a state has two powers: the legal use of violence within its own borders, keyword there, borders,
Mhm.
right, at its borders and within, and between itself and other states according with certain international laws and etc. The other enumerated power is control of the exchequer, which is today here in the US, the Treasury, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that means control of your own money supply. Um, since Bretton Woods, the United States, and really before, but taking off in World War II, after World War II and Bretton Woods, the United States has not had control, nor has the United Kingdom really. We have not had control of our monetary system. It was hijacked and suborned by the Eurodollar system. And before that, through the continued control of our currency through economic manipulations under LIBOR. It was called something before LIBOR, but for all intents and purposes, the City of London has been in control of the English currency since 1688 and has been in control of our currency since our entire inception.
Since their entire inception. Okay, let me just say
From the
something.
very beginning.
So for people who don't know, and I didn't know this, the euro dollar isn't euros and it's not dollars. It is dollars. It's dollars that are offshore, so not in the United States.
Well,
They're
it's
in
not so
offshore
much
countries.
that. It's the ability for non-US banks to issue debt in dollars,
Ah, wow. Of course, I never thought of it that way.
right? So
Yeah.
it's the ability for a German bank, a French bank, a Swiss bank, a Bahamian bank, et cetera, to issue loans, but to issue those loans in dollars.
Which
We don't
means
have. Mhm.
there's no sovereignty. The US can't have sovereignty.
Correct,
Doesn't
correct,
control its money.
correct.
No, I thought the US lost sovereignty over the dollar when the City of London set up the Federal Reserve through its proxies in
No, we
1913.
never had it. We never had it. And here's how we never had it. Now, it became formalized in that we didn't have it in Bretton Woods, and then finally formally instantiated in 1971 when we went off the gold standard,
Hmm.
right? Um, we as the US have never actually independently controlled our money supply. Now, it's not so much the money supply that we didn't control before. What we didn't control was lending. Well, we didn't control the money supply because we did not determine interest rates in our banks. And through our banks, that was determined by LIBOR in the City of London and its its predecessors. And give me one second, my brain's a little tired here today. So we didn't control the interest rates for lending. So we weren't able to determine what the interest rates are going to be lent at here in the United States according to what's going on in the United States. And oh, by the way, the United States is a continent unto itself, bigger than all of Europe and the UK combined, plus some.
Mhm.
We weren't able not only to not determine the old interest rates that we lent at here in the United States, we weren't able to do that regionally within the United States because it's different within the regionally within the United States what rates should be lent out. What that meant is that somebody else was determining our money supply and what was getting, what the VIG, the fees were getting paid for that. As well, more importantly, we didn't control the business cycle. So if we needed to do monetary tightening, what would happen is the European British system would screw something else up somewhere else in the world and modify that business cycle such that we'd have to start dumping money, dollars back into the system again. And so we were never able to go through those periodic 36-month, tightening sessions where we reset, economic fundamentals. We've never been able to do that. So, okay, that's the debasement of the dollar is finally breaking, finalizing. We switched to SOFR, so we don't use LIBOR anymore. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say that, and that was set up by Jay Powell, the SOFR system, so that the U.S.
was brought about by him, but under his guide. Yeah, but I mean, don't want to give it all to Jay Powell. No, I will give him. He fought it, and he fought it hard, and he under his guidance or his leadership, it was brought into being. So now we can control interest rates, and SOFR is regional within the United States. So we can control interest rates also regionally within the U.S., not just at one national level, which helps us better balance our own internal economy. Kept interest rates up. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to go Bretton Woods. So I don't know much about it. It was an agreement by the powers that won the Second World War that the dollar is going to be the reserve currency of the world. Is that it?
Yes. So what for all intents and purposes, what it allowed for foreign banks to make loans in dollars because the U.S. dollar was going to be the world's reserve currency. And so, and that was going to be backed by gold. But they already knew they were going to go off the gold standard. They knew that in the 1920s, 1930s, that we're going to be able to sustain it. But what Bretton Woods allowed was for the rest of the world, the folks that were in the Bretton Woods Accords, to make loans in dollars, which meant the U.S. was not in control of the U.S. money supply.
And that benefited the city of London.
And all of Europe. It's actually what sustained all of Europe. It wasn't the Marshall Plan. I mean, that was important, but also the Marshall Plan was really about funding the intelligence agencies, et cetera. What has funded Europe for the last 80 years and why they have no productivity, no innovation, nothing, and these extraordinary, exorbitant welfare states, which if you can earn it on your own productivity, fine, great. But the whole lifestyle of Europe, the 6 weeks off and all these things, which I'm not complaining about, it's a wonderful life. All of that has been funded and supported by the American middle class, by foreign banks printing things in dollars, and then are having to provide those dollars and the labor that backs up those dollars, et cetera.
Yep. I'm just going to look up something, Ian, just to share with you. This is something I found on Twitter today, which is that Britain now has 603 government departments, agencies and public bodies, and 550,000 civil servants.
Yes.
We have more civil servants in the UK than communist China does on a per capita basis. And in 1900, at the height of the empire, Britain only had 50,000 civil servants. I'm like, with that's
and it ran wonderfully.
Yeah, this is what we have right now. Is a recipe for disaster, for bankruptcy. Because I'm a government civil servant, I'm a social worker, but I don't produce any wealth. All civil servants do is they regulate and bureaucratize the creation of wealth. And
that's what they say. But when you reach above a certain, so administrative overhead in a company, right? I was a financial analyst for years for investment banking, private equity, and a business analyst before that. Well, I did corporate restructuring work. It's what got me started in business back in the late 90s, mid 90s. Once you get above a certain amount of administrative overhead cost, your administration is no longer of value to the enterprise. It's now a burden, right? And unfortunately, when you have artificial dollars just created into the money supply without corresponding underlying productivity, what you have to do is you have to go using the markets and sophisticated derivatives. You have to go off business fundamentals, and then that allows you to rise above that administrative overhead, hard thermodynamic, shall we say, conservation of energy limit.
Yeah.
Well, right. And so, what is that? What is everybody's screaming about communism? That we're going communist. We're going to be communist. Okay, I'm not sure why we're worried about that. We're already fascist. And I don't mean National Socialists, right? Because that's the folks up in Germany. But if you read Mussolini's 1932 speech, which is where fascism comes from, and people need to parse those two apart, right? But if you read his 1932 speech, it is this administrative state. It is this, complete marrying of government and corporate and finance as one big central entity, single entity. Well, when you're not producing products, how do you justify the value, or products are real services? How do you justify the valuation of your enterprise? The same with government. Well, payrolls.
Yeah.
Right? They do make work, that you've seen this in Bureaucracy. How do you conflate the value, the importance, or the value of a thing if you're not producing anything? Well, you increase budgets and payrolls. See, we're producing something of value. Look how much we're putting into it. Look how many people are working on it.
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind, and going back to what you said about fiat currency, just being able to print money. Suppose you and I, we set up this company, and our company allowed us to print money. So why would we go to the effort of creating any real product?
It might fail.
Any real work.
It might embarrass us in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's right. We'll just run some more off the printer, and then well, how do we justify our share evaluation? Oh, we'll employ somebody else, and then we can say we've printed more.
That's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. So what's propping up the value of the U.S. and the British and European governments is overhead, is personnel overhead.
Yeah.
And the number, the complexity of the systems and the, organizations, et cetera. Never mind that, they produce nothing and all they're doing actually is killing the host. So I want to, if we take it back, what is the modern, so we needed to depreciate the dollar to finally break this dollar-based monetary system. So allowed us to step away from it now, but there's still all this dollar-denominated debt out there. And that dollar-denominated debt is being used to buy politicians and bureaucrats and to fund, illicit activities and paramilitary activities, et cetera, to keep the whole scheme going. And so you have to dry up that, you have to dry up that unearned liquidity, is what I call it, out in the marketplace. And so how do you do that? You devalue the dollar. So now let's get over to gold and silver. Okay, well, what does that do?
How are they devaluing? How is the U.S., assuming this is part of Trump's strategy, because he wants to bring about the American system of political economy, and he wants to get the US out from under the heel of the City of London. How is Trump devaluing the dollar? Other than, he's emptying the Eurodollar system by, Jay Powell's doing that by interest rates in the United States, SOFR rates are higher so than in the European and UK rates. So then dollars will go to where they're treated best. So they're leaving Europe and leaving City of London to be deposited in the US, but how is he devaluing the dollar?
Well, I am not a monetary, okay, but best I understand, or the simplest way I can articulate it to people, is in order for us to revalue the dollar to where it should be, interest rates need to go much higher, 7 to 10%, maybe even higher. So yes, while we're keeping interest rates high enough, because we have to remember 5% interest rate is 5% above where interest rates, and actually 6.5% above, because we had negative interest rates in parts of Europe and the UK for quite some time. So even 5% interest rate is a substantive, dramatic increase. So it's draining, a lot of, this unearned artificial liquidity out of the system, but it can't drain it fast enough. And it's not addressing systemic structural issues, debt, rising debt, the fact that we're paying $1 trillion a year in debt service and debt payments. What would fix that and correct that would fundamentally crash our economies immediately. And that is to let interest rates rise to where interest rates would naturally, organically rise. And that's somewhere between probably 10 and 15, maybe even above 20%. So the fact that we're not doing the hard thing that's necessary to let the system reset itself, and I'm not judging them for not doing that, right? You don't want to bankrupt, you don't want to drive the world into now an inescapable, unavoidable, well, that's not we've been in an technical economic depression since 2011, 2012. Technical, right? We've got 10 cities all over. It's just they live in caravans, right? As you folks say over there, right? RVs, campers, vans, etc. We have them everywhere here. So we've been in an economic depression. Now, you don't want to go into an all-out collapse by allowing the interest rates to rise up to what they naturally and normally should be. Well, unfortunately, the byproduct of that is as you go along, your dollar is going to continue to naturally devalue itself because of the additional debt that you're adding on and not addressing.
Okay, so then the other way is to revalue gold and silver.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this quite a bit, right?
Mm.
So there's more going on with gold and silver than just a single thing. Okay, the smart money, right? The smart high net worth money that held gold and silver, not just gold and silver, but other metals, other hard commodities and baskets of commodities, and not just contracts on them, but the actual access to the base metals themselves. They've been buying that up for several years, right? Anybody's paid attention to those markets, even though they were suppressing, that's been going on for years. China, Russia, and India in particular have been buying a lot of it, right? And even private corporations here in the United States, like Palantir and others, have been buying gold for several years, for 5, 6, 7 years. So if I was going to finally let interest rates go to where they need to be to help clean this, to flush out the rest of the problems. Once I've broken this dollar system, drained all the liquidity out, kept the dollar low enough so that people who are having to pay contracts that were valued in dollars, but have to actually deliver value versus just the dollar value because of the nature of the contract, so an X amount of a thing that was priced in dollars, you still have to deliver X amount of the thing, even if the dollars are lower value. So that means it costs you more, right? Okay. So, okay. If I knew that we were going to have to go through massive deflation, which is what's absolutely necessary, or the citizenry can never participate in the economy, never participate in asset building, et cetera, right? And that's what gets you into revolution. Quite right. So I might so on one level, I might let gold and silver rise. I don't want to drive it, and I want to manage it so it doesn't run away, and it doesn't create a panic, and it doesn't run away, and it doesn't get controlled by I want to do it carefully. But I might let that carefully, modestly do that as a compensation for these high net worth entities, individuals, et cetera, who are going to lose substantive amounts in this artificial fiat and, artificial fiat money priced asset system, right? So real estate, one of the prime asset classes right now that's already lost vast amounts of value is commercial real estate, right? So, okay. The smart ones would have either been putting their converting their like Buffett, they're converting their assets to cash and just sitting on cash, knowing it's going to lose value, but it's worth more than the assets themselves, which are going to lose substantively more value. You'll have no buyers on the other side. So I'd sit in cash. Other smart buyers would be buying gold and silver, and copper and aluminum and other things. And again, not futures or derivatives, but I mean actual. The ability to actually call for 5 tons of silver or 5 tons of gold or whatever it is. I just throw those numbers out there, right? Okay, they're going to offset some of their fiat-based, and I just use that loosely because it's complicated, but they're going to offset some portion, not one for one, but they're going to be able to offset, and realistically, really not through some other artificial scheme, but they're going to be able to offset some of their dollar-based losses in the appreciation of the value of the metals. Right, commodities. This is what a commodity super cycle really is. Okay, all right. Again, trying to make it as simple as my dumb self can understand. The other fundamental piece, however, and this is where it really gets to silver. Okay, the British system from its inception was based off of what currency?
Sterling.
The pound sterling.
Yeah.
Okay, that also means India and Greater India. In the entire Commonwealth.
Okay. Now, Ian, hold up for a second. I just want to say something about gold, right? For people who don't know who are watching this, especially for Britons, I think this is certainly my experience in the UK and probably most of Western Europe, apart from perhaps the Germans and the Austrians. People don't get the value of gold. The ultimate form of money is gold. Everything. Every single asset, silver, Bitcoin, land, retail, whatever, sort of housing, it's all measured back to gold. Gold is.
I'm going to disagree with that. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. The Chinese system, if I remember correctly, the Persian system and the British system are actually all base priced in silver.
But the silver's measured
All the way
against
back.
gold.
Nope. All the way back to their beginning was silver. Why? Because in these countries, silver was far more available for to be put into currency and used as currency than gold was.
Okay.
So the British system, all the way back, by the way, to Alfred and everybody else, silver has always been the base of the English financial system.
Okay, I thought silver was like the poor man's gold. And
No,
also
that's what
not
people
as
say.
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what people say, right? And and some of that's actually true. But what would happen? The wealthy man would convert enough of his silver. He would condense. Okay, so I'm super wealthy. Do I want a castle just for my silver, or am I going to compress that down? Some compression algorithm and convert that to another asset that has higher density and easier ability to store. Okay, I'll buy gold.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But okay.
So it's just such an incredible education. Every single bloody conversation I've had with you, whether it's you on your own or with an accomplice like Blaine Hull or Tom Luongo, whoever, it's an education. So thank you so much. Bloody hell, I didn't know that. And then the other thing I want to say is that China and Russia are like some of the largest gold producers in the world, and they don't export any, and they haven't exported any for years.
Yeah, correct. In fact, they've imported a lot from Central America and elsewhere. Yeah.
And I suspect China's imported a lot more on the sly.
Correct. Well, so is Russia. And I suspect, honestly, I think America has too.
Oh, okay.
I suspect because the US, unlike the British system, we are a gold-based system. Right. When we did roll out the US dollar, while we had all these other encumbrances from the City of London and LIBOR and all of that, which is all true, and then later the euro dollar system, we've still always backed our currency, at least the dollar itself, on conversion to gold. We didn't go with silver. And most of the world, again, excepting China, and I don't remember exactly Persia and India as well, but India through its British years, right? So it's all of its current money. The point I'm getting at is this. When we get down beneath all of the derivative contract levels, right, whether it's priced in dollars or yuan or whatever, right, all these complex things, and you get down to closer to a hard asset in the bank, right? Some fundamental hard asset that then's hypothecated in whatever ways through all these derivatives. If you are going after the British system to finally undo the City of London power, and you're draining it of dollars, you're draining it of all these other assets, all these other asset classes, et cetera, at some point you're going to get down to silver. Because they're going to have to settle. And they're going to have to settle in something physical and tangible and real. And that's going to be silver for the British system as well. And that's the old banks, the old colonial banks, all these old, systems and ledgers. That was all priced, and it still is to this very day, in silver.
Oh.
And so to break all of these dependencies, all these financial obligations, commitments, relationships, and dependencies, at some point you're going to have to finally actually break the pound silver. Soros didn't break the pound. He just broke the direct conversion of the English pound to delivery of silver, just like 1971 when we went off the gold standard. But down underneath these old banks, these very old banks, some of them are hundreds of years old, in all of these countries around what was the British Empire, down underneath, they all still have fundamental contracts in silver. And
then it will become too expensive for them they don't have the silver to deliver to make payments.
Correct. And so what happens is you do two things. One, because they have to scramble and sell other kinds of assets and derivatives and other things at fire sales to try and buy silver, or to try and convince the counterparty on the other side that's expecting the silver, that we're going to give you these other assets. Here's a whole other basket of assets we're going to give you at this reduced price that would equate to the silver, because we don't have the silver. Okay. And so what it does is it forces, it's a pulse into the system, right? Where is this hidden British financial system, economic system really? Who's really connected to who? Who's really got obligations to who and for what and for how much? You're not going to find that by looking through SWIFT or Basel Accords or anything. No. These are old ledgers, old contracts. They're called historical accounts, by the way, right? Some of these historical accounts are these very large ledgers in very small banks that nobody ever heard of.
Going back hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years. Right? Because the whole system is actually based off of the Dutch East India and the British East India Company. All of it, the whole system is based off of that. So and it's also based off of rollover. So we're still carrying obligations, structurally, procedurally, et cetera. We're still carrying relationships and structures and debts and obligations that are rollover carry forward from the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company.
Okay, now what's a rollover?
A rollover is you are paying off previous debts and obligations with new debts and obligations.
Oh, so like I borrow off another credit card to pay off this to make payment on this other credit card.
And then I add onto the new credit card, so now I got even bigger balance.
Right.
And then, but I got a 12-month 0% or 1% interest rate, so I'm going to borrow at that. And then I'm not going to pay off that debt. It's impossible, by the way. I'm not going to pay off that debt when the new credit card comes in 11 months. I'm just going to roll over all the new debt, all this debt, now larger, to that credit card.
Okay, so then increasing the price of gold and silver, and you're saying in particular silver for the City of London, means that those repayments can't be made and the system will eventually break.
Correct. Well, first off, what they have to do is they have to liquidate other assets at vastly lower prices than they contracted with, right? Particularly if those assets were priced in dollars, because the dollars aren't available and the dollar is still being debased. So now what they're having to do, and this, Tom and I have talked this before, and I several times, but first you go after government theft, the use of the government to prop the whole Ponzi scheme up. Next, you go after the illicit funding, right? The money laundering, the graft, the legal, but graft and just all the criminality, terrorist funding, and all that. It's about $2 trillion a year. You go after that, but after that, you have to go after this private, unaccountable money, right? Real money. It's not real money. It's licit money in that it's legal. It's all been washed. It's all been stolen. All that's done, but that might have been done 300 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 60 years ago, or 40 years ago. And so what you have to do, so the only reason that we have all these numbers at these size and the trillions is because we just keep rolling over debts and obligations, and the numbers just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. At some point, you have to go after that whole system, right? And you have to get it back down to base fundamentals and break it. Now, you have to do that without driving the world to nuclear war, and you have to do it without, we have some other great powers out there in the world that we want to go, hey, here's a heads up. Here's what we're going to do. You might want to figure out some of the ways to not use us as your intermediary or not be dependent on us for a little while, because we got to fix this thing, because we don't want to drive the world to actual war. We'd sure rather not drive the world to civil wars either. But unfortunately, our enemies, which are ourselves, knew that we were going to, knew this was coming. And so they flooded us with hundreds of millions of people that don't frickin' belong here that we're going to have to get rid of, unfortunately, many of them through force. But what's happening is if you are going to actually genuinely break the British system, you have to go after the silver, the pound sterling, the silver, all of the contracts and obligations going back centuries that are all actually priced in hard obligations to the delivery of silver. Specifically, we're going after the British system, right? Now, other systems, it's gold, et cetera. But the fundamental problem we have is actually the City of London, because the Eurodollar system flows through the City of London.
Trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars through the City of London.
Which the American middle class has to pay for.
Yeah. Which would also explain why the bankster-owned, City of London-owned mainstream media is so hostile to Trump and what he's doing, because he's threatening their very existence.
Correct. It's also why and this also includes Germany. Now, European currency is not based, down underneath, right? The fundamental bank-to-bank, 300-year, 500-year-old bank relationships. Europe is still valued in gold, is still priced in gold. Right. The fundamental issue that Europe has is that, unlike the kingdoms, the monarchies that were there before, that knew, even the bad ones knew that they had to steadily increase their gold supply, Europe hasn't done that.
Well,
right?
You'll know about Brown's Bottom, where he sold.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Gordon Brown
Mm,
sold a load of Britain's gold. I think something like half of Britain's gold. And he did it really badly. He
yeah,
announced he was going to do it. So then the gold traders, they front run the trade,
yeah,
drop the price of gold.
yeah,
And I think the UK now has less gold than Portugal, whereas before it was, one of the major holders because of all the gold they'd plundered from,
yeah.
from three quarters of the
Not
world.
always plundered, by the way. That's something I want to say about the British. And okay, the pre-World War One British Empire was not as extractive as people say. It built up it reinvested a lot of that back in those countries. A lot. A lot of countries wouldn't exist with the infrastructure and the things that they have were it not for the British reinvesting, unlike other continental European empires that just extracted. Now, around World War One and after World War One, it became more extractive because they were trying to pay for World War One. Because World War One technically bankrupted the United Kingdom and it's never recovered. The whole empire bankrupted it. It's never recovered.
Yep.
Right? It's defaulted several times on. So around and after World War One, it did become more extractive. All the way up to today, right? It's very unbelievably extractive up through today, but in the form of debts and loans and IMF, and then causing strife and struggle and problems in the country. So a country's always having to pay a disproportionate amount of its money for internal defense, rather than on building and growing, etc. And then what does it do? It uses collateral for those loans. What's the collateral? Well, your natural resources. You're going to give those to us at pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But prior to World War One, the British Empire was not that extractive. In fact, it reinvested because it didn't learn from the failures and mistakes of previous empires like the Romans.
All right, now I'm going to bring this to a close.
Yeah.
But where this ties into, and this will be another conversation you and I are going to have, is about the brewing war in Europe. Because from my read of history, which isn't in any way as exhaustive as yours, EM, right? War happens when currencies collapse.
Right.
And they go to nothing. The fraud becomes too overwhelming. The debt burden is too great. So they go to war. So we got that brewing, and we'll talk about that. And people should look out for that. And then the other thing I want to say, I did mention earlier the American system of political economy. Well, I've recorded a video with PD Loughton, and thanks for reposting that.
Yeah.
Where we looked at Ibrahim Traore and how if people want to know what Trump wants to do in the United States, you look at what Ibrahim Traore is doing to Burkina Faso. And one of the first things he did was he took ownership of Burkina Faso's gold, which is 70% of their revenue.
And they stopped paying taxes to France.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, EM. Okay. That's going to be a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
A whole other avenue to explore.
If I might, one other thing. The advanced form of political economy in the world today that you want to look to is China.
Okay.
China is a political economic system and has been for over 30 years.
Right.
It's why they've been so wildly successful.
Yes.
It's also why Xi had to be elevated above Hu Jintao and his people. And I might or might not know his son and have worked with him when I was there. But Xi and his people had to be elevated to remove this, British Praetorian Devil's Legion system, the China hustle system from China, so that it could not be set up as the new host for all of this, and two, so that China wasn't paying a tax, shall we say, through the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, et cetera, to the rest of the world, like the U.S. is, so the yuan couldn't be set up as the new reserve currency of the world and thereby drain China of its middle class.
Very good. Didn't know that. Thank you, Ian. Like I said earlier, every conversation with you is a revelation. So please subscribe, comment, like. And I did a video with Tom Luongo about silver, posted a few days ago. So I recommend people check that out because he does a very pure financial technical analysis.
Yeah, way better
about the fundamentals of silver. But this is great, the political overview. Anything you want to say before we finish up?
No, we are lots of great, the fact that silver specifically is going the way it is a wonderful sign.
Yes.
There are some really smart people who really do understand how things work, and they are doing what they can short of war, short of kinetic war, to fix this, this 3-century-old problem.
Yeah.
We should take heart in that.
Which is the City of London's financial extractive model of stealing resources from other parts of the world.
Well, from their own people and everybody else, right? Yeah. And again, just one last thing: the City of London is Amsterdam, is Venice, is Rome. That's who's been owning and control for 300 some odd years. So I don't want to put this all on us English people.
No, it's European. All right. Ian, thank you so much. I'll have the links where people can find you. Comments, questions. I had a little, no, it wasn't even a disagreement. I said to my wife, I think silver is prettier. She said, no, gold is prettier. So let me know in the comments whether you think which is prettier. And either way, you can send both to me and Ian. We don't mind.
I don't want to have to maintain that. I might have to
Okay.
shoot somebody. Yeah.
Send me your sovereigns. All right.
There you go.
There you go. All right. All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.